All right, welcome to the Stampscapes lab. We're going to be trying something different here, and that is the use of some Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White, which is a opaque watercolor paint. And I use that for a lot of different things, but I haven't used it as a base like I use the Brilliance White, Moonlight White pigment ink for. Okay, so I was looking at some of the textured papers that I purchased recently, including a glitter paper, and it's a little bit more textured, and I was wondering if the Dr. Martens can possibly fill in some of those grooves on that type of paper. Then it got me to thinking about other types of applications on other surfaces. I think it'll apply and dry with no problem because it really dries fast, but I'm not quite sure if it will adhere to different surfaces. So I just have some scrap pieces here, and I thought we'd give that a shot. We have the glossy dark cardstock here. I don't think it's going to adhere to that one or the gold, but will it dry to the point where I can stamp additional imagery on here and spray seal it afterwards? Now, if we can do that, then I think that will be a pretty good application for the paint. And with these two right here, my hopes on these two, in terms of being able to apply things like colored pencils over the top of it. I don't know if, I think it's going to take it, but I'm not quite sure, but we'll give it a try here. So I'm going to have to plan things out a little bit with this one because where I apply this ink, it's going to give probably a pretty thick slathering of that paint, in which I'm going to apply my imagery on top of, so I have to have a kind of a rough idea of where that's going to go. Hello and good afternoon to all of you. Hello, Froggy Fresh and Sandy and Ginger. Hope you're doing well this weekend. I was sitting around and I've been wanting to give this a try here for, I don't know, maybe a week or so after I use some of my other glitter paper. This one's kind of more like a sandpaper. It's like a fine, extra fine grain sandpaper feel to it. Some of the other glitter papers, it's a lot more grooved, and this one's more of an iridescent, so I thought this one would be a good one to try out. So, okay, so if you didn't hear what I was, I don't know, mentioning when I began this one, I'm going to try the Bleed Proof White as a base for some other imagery. The Bleed Proof White, for anyone that doesn't know, is a very opaque watercolor paint, and it's just that it's bleed proof, and something that a lot of calligraphers use for light colored lettering or white lettering on darker surfaces, you know, for whatever invitations, whatever their calligraphic reverse lettering needs are. Okay, so every time you use this, you kind of have to add water to it. You don't want it super watery. You want it more like the consistency of like maybe a thin syrup, okay? And, you know, just add a few drops of water in there every time you're going to use it. I'm going a little bit more this time because I'm going to add kind of a little bit of a thicker application of it here. So, all right, so I am just going to go across here. This is going to be kind of like a snowy scene in theory. We'll see if any of these things work out. I'm hoping, like I said, I'm hoping that a couple of these surfaces work with this foundation. What this is going to provide me is just a quicker way to apply a base coat that I can apply other types of media to, potentially, I don't know. All right, so this is my snowy bank here that I'm going to be stamping on top of here. And we'll just go like, I don't know, I'll go a little bit below midway, I think, on this one. So I'll go like this. And then I'll fill in. Now, maybe I'll go for a little bit more gesture. I'm not sure. You know, I can have some kind of brush strokes in the back background and just not have it so flat. And I think that might be kind of more interesting. But we'll see. The good thing is if I can apply some colored pencils to this, and if I don't fill in everything with your colored pencil, you might be able to use a white colored pencil to eradicate some of the, the darker areas that I've retained. I'm not a painter at all, and using kind of brushes and, typical painting applicators, but I'm getting a little bit more used to it. Back in my school days, I had to use, paints all the time for different things, but I was never really good at it at all. I'm better at kind of harder, kind of, I don't know, more pen and ink types of media. My life drawing teacher, I don't know, we were going along in class. I don't know, at one point in time during the semester, we went to the zoo to do some drawings on site, and I just, we don't have our full toolbox, so it was more of a sketching kind of field trip, and I was just using a roller, like a Bic roller, I think it was, or Pentel rolling writer. And my life drawing teacher told me that after he saw that, he goes, "Oh, just use that for now on," or something like that in class. I was like, "Oh, okay." Because we were using like things like charcoals and graphite, softer media up until then. Okay, so that is matte black cardstock. This one is the glitter. You can see that right there. Slightly textured and probably slightly porous. I'm not quite sure if it's porous or not. It's quite different from the other glitter cardstocks that came in the multicolored pack. So this one right here, it's, the media is really absorbing in there the water because it's matte, and it's kind of buckling, but when it dries, it should flatten out. I don't know. I'm guessing it will. I'm not sure. Okay, so let's do the same thing on this one here. It's definitely a different feel putting the paint on this one. Just because of that shimmery type of surface on there. So I'm working from very matte to, less porous as I go here, with these two especially. I don't know if these ones will apply to those ones at all. This one, there's a slight resistance, but I don't know. This bleed-proof white is. This type of paint it's kind of designed to be used on a lot of different things because, calligraphers are going to use, a lot of different surfaces. So it probably has some kind of chemistry that's just kind of tailor-made for a lot of different surfaces, both matte and, more glossy or, again, less porous. It has a kind of a chalky finish to it, and I'm guessing it's because whatever binder's in there, and I don't know what makes it so bleed proof. Now, see, it's not completely bleed proof the way that I'm using it because I'm using it kind of thinly on there, with a little bit of a gestural kind of approach. On this one right here, I think I'm going to put in a little bit more of this here, but going back to that chalkiness of this, it provides a nice kind of base, and it dries really fast. But again, it's a watercolor paint, so it's not like an acrylic either. That's also water-based. Acrylics kind of dry with that kind of shiny kind of finish to them, and this does not. And again, it goes back to that thing of, a lot of calligraphers using it. You can't have it, your letter forms like wet, after you're writing your letter forms. It has to dry fairly quickly. Because you don't want to have a bunch of smearing or something like that. All right, let's give it a shot on this gold here. Yeah, this gold here is very, very non-porous. It's just kind of sitting on the surface. It is giving me some decent coverage, though. It might be one of those things where we might be able to apply a couple coats, but I don't see that this isn't. It's probably going to adhere slightly better than like a Brilliance pigment ink on there, which is also water-based. But I'm not quite sure how much. Like, I might try to do some sort of stamp impression on this. And what it might do is it might remove this instead of having the ink transfer. The safest ink to use on this, for me, in my opinion, would probably be a thicker ink like the Brilliance black or white, just because it's so thick. The StazOn, you know how fast it dries? It might remove that ink. It might lift it off. Or this paint, not ink. I'm not sure. I might be able to go for multiple coats of this too, but the more coats you put on here, it could be a matter of it might remove easier the thicker you apply it. I'm not sure, because it just gets built up. So when you try to put an application of something over the top of it, the thicker it is, it might peel up easier because whatever you're stamping into there has more to grab onto, because this is going to be porous now where the actual surface is not. All right. So just remember, if you're stamping over the top of this, we're stamping into this case the bleed-proof white and not so much the straight foil. It kind of looks interesting though, doesn't it? Like if I just do some white trees up on top of there, it could look kind of interesting. I'm not sure. All right, so that is the foil, probably the least porous of these three here. And we have the dark chrome coat cardstock, which I don't think they make anymore. Well, chrome coat, the original companies have gone. I don't know. This one looks quite. It's like painting on glass. Okay, now I'm really surprised. This is like far less porous than the gold. Why would that be, though? This is the one that really surprises me. We'll see if we can get an extra coat on there, though. What might be kind of interesting is using primer, just regular primer on, these types of applications. Or like a Kills paint, that you just get at the hardware store. Okay, so when I go on with additional coats, it almost looks like I have like some kind of resist on here. I don't think, nah, I didn't spray seal this. Okay, so it looks like I can get some coverage, That little bit down there as it dries, it gives me a little bit of something to grab onto, I think. Because it did fill in a little bit more in some of these other areas. You can see how patchy it is, though. So those primers, though, too, I mean, if you have some kind of, little template or something like that, in theory, you can just do a spray paint, primer, and add it right over it. And you know how primers are, they're flat in terms of their finish, so they might be able to take certain types of media. I'm not sure which ones though, but I would think it could work. I mean, this is what we're kind of using this as right here as a primer. I did these little wisps on this one, just because it's so easy to apply. Now, here's the other thing too. I wasn't quite sure if by adding this to the surface, if it was going to apply kind of a raised application of it that was uneven, like especially like right here where it's thicker and then thinner and thicker like that. If I stamp into this, am I going to be able to get in that, even though it's kind of microscopic in terms of the depth difference? With rubber stamps, that could make a difference. So I wasn't quite sure if I could stamp into this and get in between, say, the grooves, no matter how shallow they might be. But all right, so let's give these a shot. Let's see if we can get any kind of impressions into these at all. All right, so this one's kind of interesting to me, this glittery one, because this right in here, I don't know if you can see it, but it almost looks like a glittery kind of white down here. So I guess it is kind of showing through, especially in the less the thinner application of the paint areas like that. I can still see the glitter showing through. Okay. All right. So, anyways, let's give it a shot here. All right. So, like I said, I think the easiest thing is going to be, the media with the maybe the best chance of success is the Brilliance, just because it's thicker again, and the thicker the ink, the more ink can transfer on there. So let's give it a try. Hello, Candy. Just set up campsite. Sounds like fun. All right, let's see here. I'm standing up for this impression. Now, one of the other things I thought about doing is just stamping these, the imagery out in like a white instead of a black. But let's see how this works out. If it works out. Okay. Yeah, I think it did. It's like, that is a perfect impression over the top of it. It's not grooved at all. And the Dr. Martens took the ink just fine. Now, I don't know how it's going to take, or if it'll take dye-based inks. I would guess it would, but you'd want to do that on a fairly flat surface, I would think. So let's try these other ones out here. So if it took it on that, I don't think it should have a problem on the matte, but we'll see. I try not to have too many preconceived, or as many preconceived notions. I would think that if I know kind of the general properties of certain types of media, I'd be able to, have a decent hypothesis on how things are going to work out. But I've come to realize that I think more than something not working out, I've been surprised at the different things that are working out with your different media in terms of compatibility. It might not be with every type of application of it, though. For example, we can try certain media on a certain surface, but it doesn't work in a certain way, but then you use more of a base coat or something like that, and the success of the the other media on top of that, the additional layers might have a better chance of success, or it just might be different with different types of inks or brands too, you know. Yeah, okay, see that impression right there? I mean, that looks pretty decent. I mean, I took it up here where it's not in there, but, and there's some of that area in there where I left it just the black paper. So that just kind of reads as shadow in there. But I'm getting pretty good impressions so far. Hello, Sandy. Froggy Fresh, have a snow cone while watching these snowy scenes. Yeah. Or a shave ice, if you guys know what that is. Hello, Barrett. Good to see ya. Hello, Donna. Candy brought Stampscapes to the campsite. That's what everyone should do. And everywhere you go, always take your Stampscape stamps. Be it if you're out to dinner, casual or fancy, take your Stampscape stamps, and you know there's time in between whatever the courses. Hello, CM. Okay, let's give it a try on this. Okay, so like I said, these are all nice and dry now. It doesn't take long for the bleed-proof white to dry at all. So far so good, you know, I think. Okay, so why am I doing this? This kind of application of this right here and a paintbrush, for certain types of usages, I've been using the Brilliance white, you know, just with a cotton ball and applying that. But, you know, I mean, that takes a certain amount of time to build up a very light application of white ink. And sometimes when you're building it up to that type of opacity, you're kind of, when you're doing it with like this, you start to kind of remove some ink much of the time. So this is just helping out, I think, in terms of the speed here. Okay. All right, so is this going to transfer or remove the white? Well, it transferred absolutely fine. Okay. And this is the one that was the least porous or something like that. So it transferred just fine on there. Let me see, I stamped right there. Where did I get that other, I don't know, part of the impression on there? Did I? Stamped over there. Okay, anyways, I'm overlapping this with this other one, like so. Okay. Okay, this is working out much easier than I thought, so I probably don't need to hold that down as long. The Dr. Martens is porous enough where everything is just transferring without any type of issue at all, as far as I can see. Okay, let's try the gold here. Hello, Crazy Cat. Okay, so if you just joined in, all of these different types of surfaces right here have been, the white foundation has been created with the Dr. Martens Bleed Proof White. So, yeah, quite a, kind of a small amount of it really goes a long way. And I'm trying the imagery stamped over the top of it, okay? And that's because, if I don't put that white foundation down like that, on these darker surfaces, even the gold, I probably wouldn't be able to see just a black image over the top of it. Now I could stamp this out in reverse in white on top of black, but then it's going to be kind of more linear, and it's not going to read as a kind of more of a solid body. It's going to be, you know, like it would look like a negative. All right, so let's try the gold. Transferred absolutely fine. Now I'm wondering if I can apply. I didn't think I'd be able to apply or to color these at all. You know, with like some colored pencils. I still think that I might scratch into it. Okay. Now there's some other things that we can do though. We can spray seal this. Okay, and so that this is completely adhered. Okay. Now, if I wanted to use colored pencil on these, I would spray seal them with a workable fixative, which is textured, and it's designed so that you can apply additional, you can fix whatever you have down and then apply additional media on the top of it. But I'm wondering if I could just go straight on to this. I don't know. I doubt if I could, but it might be worth giving it a shot. All right, so that worked out okay. I was going to put in some additional like cloud forms too. Maybe we'll do that on a couple of these just to mix things up. All right, so if I applied some additional clouds on here with the Brilliance white on this case, if I'm tapping into this, I wonder if I'm going to be removing it on these two. On these two, I don't think it'll come off. This, you know, I think this is fixed right here without any problem at all. Let's just do these ones first as far as imagery goes, though. All right, so can I get some good white impressions on top of this? Let's give it a shot. This one might be kind of interesting with like silver trees or something like that. But let's just go with the white here. Let's just keep it real simple. Candy, what are you at your campsite? Are you camping in like a trailer or something like that, or are you camping sleeping in like a tent or something else? Okay, now this case, I am holding this down a little bit longer because I am stamping onto this a little slightly textured and non-porous surface, okay? So this down here, remember stamping out the snowy bank image right here. Remember I was stamping that into a fairly porous surface of the Dr. Martin's bleed proof white, okay? Oh, that came out really light. See, that's not, it doesn't show up too much. It's not too bad, but I'd like it a little bit whiter. Let me see if I can just add some more ink on this one. Now, if you have a stamp positioner, you might be able to hit that again, like multiple times. Let it dry, though, a little bit. Okay, let's see this right here. If these don't stamp out very kind of light, then those I might use as my background trees. Okay, let's go about right. Here, let's do this. This one will be kind of on the other side of the the hill here, so I'm going to mask off the top of it like that and stamp this a little bit lower. Like about like so. Candy's tent days are over. Yeah, sleeping on like, you know, sleeping bag mats and stuff like that and setting all that up. It's such a drag. Oh, that's the type of camping I've always done. Hello, Cindy. Yeah, you're in a trailer. That sounds really nice. There's less stuff to take, to set up and take down too. Outside now with the river flowing, birds singing. That's one of the things I love about camping. It's the sounds getting out in nature, or sometimes it's the absence of sound, man-made sound at least. Okay, that showed up a little bit better with some additional ink on there. Okay. So let's do this on this one. Now remember, I'm doing this one. This is a fairly non-porous surface, and it is also glitter, So it's not taking the ink as easy as like something like a matte paper. Okay. Okay, so if I'm going to do this one in black, let me get all the white images done with this first, just so I don't have to clean it. One of the good things about kind of working in a kind of assembly line style here. Okay. We're all going to come over to your campsite, Candy. That sounds really nice. And join you. We hope you packed enough food for all of us here. Candy, you should be live streaming from your location. All right. So yeah, you kind of do that a little bit higher, a little bit lower. If I did that in this kind of small format here, it's good to kind of change up a little bit between impressions, heights a little bit, just to I don't know, maybe not balance it out, but give it a little bit less of a kind of a tension from having too much symmetry going on there. If you stamp this up like high, it'd look like a couple different eyeballs and a nose and a mouth. Now that I said that, you guys probably can't see anything else but a face there. But that's what happens. You kind of mix it up a little bit. Okay, now on this one right here, let's see how this one stamps out. On this one, this sure looks raised, so I'm wondering if there's going to be a little bit of a change in height, even if it's small, between the Dr. Martens white and that black in there. Because on this one right here, remember, it just wasn't absorbing into the surface like at all, it seemed. So we'll see if I can get just a clean impression if I'm stamping this right over the top of it, where this is going into that area right there. I just don't want a gap in between like the trunk and the rest of the tree up here. So let's see how it goes. On this one right here, it's fairly large. I could use the larger tree and smaller one. But let's just keep this fairly simple. I want to experiment with this one. Let me also try this too. I'm going to just keep this on the surface a little bit longer, where the ink starts to set up a little bit and hopefully dry slightly before I remove that. So that on this type of surface right here, it doesn't just work like a vacuum, and when I lift it up, it's removed, I don't know, whatever, 50% of the ink just, comes off of the surface instead of transferring over to it. Okay, that one's really pretty good. So on this one right here, this one, this glossy dark, as far as the imagery goes, what seemed to be kind of the most incompatible with the bleed proof white, it looks the best, as far as the strongest imagery with these reverse out images. It's the strongest impression quality. So isn't that strange, The least porous then is giving the strongest, impressions. You think it would kind of resist it just the same as it did with the other water-based media. So I don't even need to keep that on there for too long, but that one did come out slightly lighter, or darker, than this one, because of this one I just kept on the surface for a lot longer. Okay, let's go with this over here. I guess you can use it to your, you can use that strategically if you want kind of a more distant looking trees. You just use the same ink, you just make the impression time shorter and just lift it off where, you're bringing a lot more of that ink back with you. All right, this one right here, that being said, let's leave this one down here for quite some time. I miss camping. I haven't been in quite some time. I used to go camping all the time, and then I started, when my son got old enough, I started taking him, and then we were in the Cub Scouts, and we were going mostly on the Cub Scout camping trips, which we're going to kind of, for me, it wasn't very interesting locations, but it was just happens to be those locations where you can have a large enough group site to take, 120 people potentially, which was like the opposite type of camping that I like to do, without a lot of people around and a lot of open space. But I don't know. Those are fun times, though, in terms of the group aspect. But I haven't been in a few years. Okay, so anyways, those are the trees on this one right here. I'm really hoping that this one takes some additional media down here, where I can add in some like lighter, maybe blue tones or something like that into that snow area. All right, let's try it on the let's try it on the silver. Now after that one right there, I'm thinking it should work on the silver without any problem. Or not silver, but the gold. All right. It's kind of weird on this one. I wonder if I had some additional ink on there, because these impressions of the winter ash look like they have a pinkish tinge to them. I don't think I stamped out these trees in a color before, though. That looks great on top of that gold, doesn't it? I've done this before. I've done white impressions on gold, but it's been quite a while. But I haven't done it like this down here before. So having that little bit of that gold showing through down here, I think looks pretty good. Now this gold one, after it's spray sealed, that gold isn't going to quite look so, mirrored. It'll look, a little bit more on the kind of brushed gold look to it. All right. So just keep that in mind. You know, you can see how mirrored this is by, you know, having, you can see my hand in there, that reflection in there. So it's really mirrored like that. So if you don't have too much like in the center area where that's the most reflected area, what you do is you just kind of spray seal. I mean, you can put a little something over it. You can kind of cover it up slightly like this, you know, when you're spray sealing, just spray seal all the way around. If you don't get like every single little branch, it's, you know, that's not going to matter. And I'm saying spray sealing because this will dry on here, but it might not adhere, okay? All right, let's add a little bit of focal point imagery in these. And I have my elk stamp. Actually, this one's a little bit too big. If you don't know, these are acrylic blocks with tack and peel on them, so actually I need to clean this one off. See, they get a little dusty and they're less tacky, but you just kind of rinse them off, the tack and peel, and then you can get that temporary, you know, mounting of your unmounted rubber stamps on there. You don't have to do that. You know, the tack and peel is for the rubber stamps, not you know, something like clear stamps where you don't need that. All right, let me see if I can get a clean impression. This is really thick ink, and I also just re-inked that, so I just want to make sure I didn't get a real blobby impression of it, especially around on the horns there. So let me just lightly ink this up and try to even it out a little bit like that. Okay. All right. Okay, this one right here, these little images, you got to make sure that you're not skewing it. This is a really thick ink on top of the foil, and it's easy to kind of skew it, okay? But that being said, if you kind of smear the imagery, and if you're doing it in Brilliance, you just kind of wipe it off and clean it off. You got to make sure you're not blurring out everything else. Maybe take a Q-tip and just kind of wipe it off, and it'll come right off. You can even let it dry first before you wipe it off, and then just restamp it. You know, it might be easier to do after you after it dries, in fact. Now that's on the gold. You can't do that like on a matte cardstock. You know, wipe it off. This is going to be, you know, adhered on here fairly firmly. All right. See that it's in the snow wisps. All right. I'm just doing these. I'm just keeping this composition real simple. So I'm using the same imagery. Okay, now that one I just dabbed off like that. You can see when I stamped it into the black Brilliance ink right there, the black Brilliance ink is still wet. Okay. All right. Now on this one, we can see what that white looked like on there. Now the white on this one is like practically invisible now. Let's go back to the black here and see if I can get a black impression of those trees on that surface. I don't know if I can. Oh, here. No, let's do something else here. Okay, so we can't really see. That didn't give us a strong impression on there. So let's do this. Let's do a foundation of some brilliance in this space right in here. I'll just add some clouds. And then we'll just stamp right over the top of the Brilliance ink as opposed to directly on that glitter paper. Hello, Jen. How are you? Would you use a workable fixative spray on the gold? If you want to, you could. I mean, it would be fine. The workable fixative is going to give you an even more matte finish than a glossy, though. And for something like a glossy finish on here, generally I like to keep it as glossy as possible to keep it within that kind of the spirit of the actual surface that you're working with. You know, I mean, I do things like spray, you know, semi-gloss or matte cardstock sometimes with a glossy, you know, spray. So I do change the spirit of, you know, some of my surfaces a little bit. A glossy spray on top of matte, unless you do like many coats, it doesn't really turn it glossy. I guess it could, but it turns it more of like a satiny finish. But on something like this, where I really do like the mirrored surface of it, my preference would be a gloss on this one. But like I said, I mean, you know, people use, you know, everything. You know, if you don't have an acrylic spray, but people have hairspray, I definitely say just, yeah, why not? Go for it. Use it. But yeah, I mean, so with the workable fixative, my answer was based on it just kind of for the sealant types of purposes. But if I wanted to do some additional tones over the top of it, then yeah, the workable fixative would be better for that. Like, for example, if I wanted to try to add some colored pencil on top of this one, you know, just kind of, you know, to add some additional shadow work or something like that, some subtle shadow work with colored pencils, then that would be a good one for, you know, workable fixative. That's if the workable fixative would make it adhere so well that I can go into it with a hard medium, like a pencil, and if that still wouldn't scrape off what I've already applied on there. I don't know if it would. It might. All right, let's see if we can add in some of this little cloudy formation in here in the background. This is applying really slowly, which is one of the reasons why I use the Dr. Martens on here as opposed to this. This is really weird because that ink does look red. I don't know, did I do something like a sunset card using that image? I'm looking down here to see if I'm kind of removing some of that ink as well. You know, tapping over this, is it removing any of that ink or paint that's applied in that area? I'm not really sure. I think it's all dry there though. But I do see a little bit of pink residue on here. So okay, so I'm not applying too much of this here. This is going to be easier if I do this in terms of a little bit of a cloud formation. Let's go with your good old-fashioned cloud stencil, like the old days of stamping, where you couldn't buy cloud stencils. Although this is still a good way to do it for a lot of variation. The technique that I'm doing here is I'm kind of getting a pretty good, slathering of that ink and then putting a blob there like that. And then what I do is I just kind of blend that out, as much as I can. You kind of stay in that one area, but then you just kind of move. See, I'm kind of moving down from that. But look how pink that looks. What the heck is going on here? Oh. I wonder if it's a water-based dye on that glitter, but that glitter looks blue, though. I don't see like a violet tinge to it, though. But it sure looks pink, though, huh? And I'm just using white media. I bet you it's coming off of this, though. I bet you there's a little bit of a violet tinge in there. All right. So I need to keep that in mind here. I need to keep it in mind as I'm dabbing back into this because I don't want to pollute my white pad with a bunch of, kind of a pinkish hue. Definitely pink though. Or, yeah. I mean, it doesn't look bad, but I don't know, surprising. But look at how it goes on white like that, okay? And then watch as it dries, it'll take on that that other hue for some reason. It's probably a water-based dye that's on this glitter. It's probably a glitter that starts off, just like silver or white, okay? And then what they do is they go over it, like a lot of the foils I've noticed do that. The cheaper foils, like the Recollections one. As I apply white into it, it just it puts that ink back into solution that's sitting on the surface. See that right there? Look at that. It's kind of moving in that direction. It's far less white again. All right, so let's see. Let's see if that provides me with enough of a foundation for some black imagery on here. Just white over the top of that is just not going to show up at all. But let's see how this works with black, if it does or not. If it does, that'll be great because I want it to, have some other uses of this type of glitter paper than just, matting off some cards. Hello to the Hodgkins. How's everything out there? What's the weather like in Maine? I was just thinking of Maine because I did this. This was the card from Friday night's video. Portland head, right? All right, let's give this one a shot here. And let's try it in black this time. And we'll see if I can get some more contrast going here. The question is, if I stamp it down here, is the trunk going to be nice and black? But then where I stamp it up there, it just, the ink just kind of, keeps moving towards, transparency through, various degrees of translucency, right? So let's try to get enough of this ink to transfer. And again, it's not going to be, there's not going to be that much, as much contrast as I'd want on this because that keeps getting darker and darker. Okay, so See, this is going into this violet tinge, so that's the colors that I would use down here to create shadows. I would stick with that kind of that color that it's kind of turning to anyways. Look how, I don't know if you can see it on that cotton ball there, but it's really kind of a violet tinged tone on here. Okay, that is a little bit better. I can see it at least. It'd probably be better with some pine trees, you know, more solid forms. This one's like this bony kind of, you know, tree, but let's just keep using it because I want to be able to kind of compare and contrast what it looks like on these different surfaces. I'm not sure what my favorite one is. I need to be careful about touching this. I smeared a little bit of a tree there. I should heat set these. Now this one I don't need to worry about heat setting because this is, again, this is a matte cardstock here. So all of my images, I'm sure, are nice and dry, but, you know, where they're sitting on tops of a, you know, these glossy kind of non-porous surfaces, it takes a little bit longer for the ink to dry because it's not drying by absorption in addition to evaporation. It's having to, you know, all these images up here are having to dry just strictly by evaporation. I'm trying to find a place for this to where I could stamp this. If I stamp it up here, and I'm not sure if we'll be able to see it enough. And then if I stamp it down here, I already have all these forms, so I don't want this rock, you know, to be interfering with the silhouette of this. Maybe I'll wait to do this one. Let me wait to do this one. I'm not sure if I want that in here. Like I said, up here on the horizon, that's kind of the natural spot for it, but black over the top of that dark area, we're not really going to be able to see it in its now. It's like really it should be the kind of the focal point of the scene. So, all right, let's give some other things a shot here, and let's see if we can apply some additional media on here. I don't need to do too much on here, but some highlights and shadow work potentially, or some additional texture. So this type of gold foil, you got to be careful about kind of applying too strong of a heat in any one area for too long because it tends to rainbow on you, if you know what I mean. That metal kind of starts to change colors, which you can do strategically, you know, if you want that effect on there, but just be aware of it. And I don't like applying too much heat to this too because it really starts to bow on me. I mean, you can counter bow it and flatten it out, and, you know, I would... You know, this is going to get formatted on some other cardstock anyway. But I don't know. I don't like it when it bows too much and I have to counter, you know, kind of bend it to get it flat again. I don't like to do it too much. Okay. Like I said, this one really doesn't need it. And this one for probably the latest black imagery. Look how pink those clouds are like completely disappearing. This one's like completely curling on me. You know, whatever's Now, it looks like it's starting to flatten out just on its own. You see that right there? It's just that little bit of heat, but you take that heat off and it's starting to flatten out just naturally. Huh. All right. So let's see this one here. Okay, let's try some of these colored pencils on here. All right. So, yes. Couldn't remember if I still had this pale kind of violet here. Okay, so let's work some shadows on this a little bit. And let's see if it applies. I think it could potentially make this a little bit more interesting just to have some additional hue in this grayscale imagery here. Okay, so let's start off with, let me go. I'll start light and work darker. Okay, that bleed-proof white foundation down there is slightly slicker in terms of the surface than a foundation of the Brilliance ink when it dries. The Brilliance ink feels like it has a little bit more texture to it, like a piece of this like copy paper. That's what it feels like to me. But this Dr. Martin's is not too bad. I'm not quite sure how many layers of colored pencil I'll be able to build up on here, though. Because, you know, the slicker something is, and smooth, the less tooth, you know, there is on the paper for the colored pencils to grab into. All right, so I'm adding it right around in this. There's this little creek here in this image. But just basically where the darker areas are in the image is where I'm adding some of this colored pencil. So in other words, I'm just reiterating the shadow areas in here. This is a really light tone right here, so it's not adding a huge amount of contrast or anything too noticeable right now. But that's why I like it. I like to do it from kind of light tones and work into my darker tones, my bolder tones, darker and more intense colors. So light and dull to darker and more intense. And that way you can have a lot of control over kind of the general look of your piece because you're just building things up, you know, kind of slowly and kind of methodically. All right, here's a little bit of blue, and we'll just apply that right over where I did the pale violet to get a mixture of the two. Okay, and the darker violet. I think the darker violet, I was trying it the other day and it didn't apply on, maybe it was this one right here. It wouldn't apply up here because this purple here, even though they're both Prismacolors, this one adhered no problem, but this one, the lead was like harder, so it was like scratching off some of my base coat layers as opposed to, you know, transferring on there. So I had to stop using it, for that piece at least. On here, it's applying with no problem though. All right, so just slightly more I don't know, kind of volumes in there. Let's do let's do this one. I think these colored pencils are going to work on this one too. On the glossies, I'm not quite sure. Look at this whole slathering up here. I really hate that, so I'll just use some white paint pen in that area. Okay. Yeah, this is applying on here, no problem. This is like a perfect, like a colored pencil surface right here, in fact. You know, it has that kind of a grainy, you know, sandpapery texture to it, so that's, you know, having that little bit of tooth is what colored pencils really like. Actually, see, so I'm using this pinkish tinge, so it's kind of, you know, giving me something in common with that purple tinge in the background. Look how dark that thing just keeps getting, that white in the background just keeps merging more and more with that background. So I guess if you want those clads to really stand out, you're really going to have to apply a lot of that, you know, a pretty thick layer of your white Brilliance ink on there. And I'm saying Brilliance specifically, it's not just a brand, it's a specific type of ink that dries on non-porous surfaces. And this isn't not really a very porous surface right here. Okay. So I don't know, you can try, you know, another brand of, you know, pigment inks, like a here, you know, whatever you have, an oil-based variety, but I'm not really like quite sure if it'll dry or not, even with heat setting, okay? All right, so I'm just adding the shadows here. I'll go and add some highlights in here as well. But here's the difference between the two. You can see how smoothly, I really like colored pencils on top of this glitter paper. On here, it took it okay, but it's a little bit kind of rougher looking. All right, the glossy. The one that worked the best, I think, for the imagery by far. I don't know, the gold looks, you know, not too bad either. Okay, I'm not going to use this one right here. I'm going to go with the softer. Let me go with the blue here. This looks like black glossy cardstock, but it's actually like a deep, deep navy. I don't know if you can see any of that blue tinge at all. Yeah, it just looks black. I mean, even sitting here next to it, it almost looks black. All right, let's apply some of this, okay? Let's see. This is a fairly soft colored pencil. Yeah, it's not. It's removing my tones. So I would have to spray seal this, okay, and get this affixed down here, and then try some colored pencils over the top of it. Now, I can do it really lightly, maybe, in some areas, but in some areas, as I'm applying this, it just looks like it's getting darker than where I'm applying. It's not, and it's not getting darker with blue tones. It's like, oh, it's because I'm scratching off the white and it's revealing the black of the paper, or, you know, the darkness of the paper. Yeah, like right here. Yeah. Down here, I probably put more of that white paint, so I get some of that transfer of that blue down here. I'll try to go really lightly and see if I can just get a little bit down. I don't want to go and spray seal it right now. But I can see where this would work with a sealant down here and getting, you know, some of these extra tones on here. I think that would be pretty cool. Now, okay, so if I can't get it with that on this one, I really doubt if I'm going to be able to apply this just directly on top of that white and without having to scratch off the paint. It does seem to be applying. No, okay, it's scratching. I thought I was getting lucky right there. It was going on there a little bit, but then I went over here and it scratched off the... Yeah, this is just scratching it right off. Yeah, so on these ones, where they're very non-porous, you're really going to have to spray seal these if you want to use something like a colored pencil. But I don't know, colored pencil is like a really kind of super unconventional thing to use on these types of surfaces to begin with. We're just seeing if this foundation here that's not adhering on there would allow us to go on there without a sealant, and there's no way. But that being said, all we need to do is spray seal it, and we can kind of test it out afterwards, and it might work. All right, so let's add in some additional media on here. I'm always looking for my white paint pen. I need to get another whole pack of those. Oh, here we go, right here. Okay, acrylic white paint pen. Now, I don't know if I can add this either. It might kind of remove some of the media, or it might get stuck in my paint pen as well. Let me see. This one's like... I think I'm going to have to spray seal this to do just about anything on here. Let me see if I can go in with the thicker one. Yeah, the thicker one applies no problem because more paint is coming out of this with each application, so it's really thick. So let's add a little bit more kind of a change of values here and highlighting with this pen if we can. I don't know if I can keep using it. It might start clogging up. I'm not sure. There's some rocks in the snowy bank that I can kind of, put a little bit of a snow on the top of them. It's already inherently in the design, but, we've slathered over it in some areas with, or I guess undercoated some of these, so they're not so white on the top anymore, but they're kind of showing a little bit of gold. So I don't know if you can see that down there. On the tops of these rocks, I just made those, whiter with some of this. Okay. You can see that, that elk in there. I mean, it's not completely opaque. It's more of a goldish tinge where the color's showing through. All right, let's use some of this on these as well. It's a little bit darker down here, so this white should show up potentially a little bit lighter. Okay, this is an acrylic paint pen, which is water-based. And as I'm going over some of that Dr. Martens, it is putting some of that Dr. Martens back into solution, I can see. From the sheer amount of, liquid water that's coming out of this. So I need to be careful about that. It might be easier just to paint on here with some additional Dr. Martens. Let me try that here. See, if you're going on with a wetter application here, it should transfer. This was, I don't know, probably a little bit drier in this case here, so. So see this, I'm adding it to the top sides of some of these rocks. All right. doing that with this here. I'm going to do it on this one as well. Might as well while I have my brush out. And I'm going to have to wash it out anyways. This bleed-proof white really washes out really cleanly out of your brushes, even if you have your brushes sitting around for days and it's like totally dried completely hard. It's not like an acrylic paint where you can't get it out. It just goes right back into a solution and it'll come right out of there. In fact, one of my videos has a bottle of a bleed-proof white that was like completely crusted, you know, and like cracking, but I was able to get it back into solution. That's the bottle that I'm using right now. It just happened to be a bottle that I had sitting around that I probably hadn't used for 15 years. All right, you see those little white kind of elements down there like that. And, oh, let's see. Might as well do it on this one too. Look at me, I'm a painter. No, not really. All right, let's bring a little bit additional texture into these. I think that'll be probably the first time I've used like a couple different paint brushes in any scene, like ever. All right, where did my toothbrush go? I just washed that out. Sometimes I leave it over by my computer after I wash it out. Where did it go? Does anyone see my toothbrush here? Sometimes it's like right in, let me go, I think I might have left it on my other desk here. I knew it. It's right over by my other computer. All right, so you just want a little bit in your tip like that, okay? And then just take out the excess. And then we'll put a little bit, I don't know what this one will represent, maybe some stars in the sky. Usually if you can see the splatter down below it, it could be, you know, like snowfall, but this is so white down here, you're not going to be able to see where it splatters in there. So if you can see that right there, yeah, let's get a little bit more just so you can see it on the video. See that right up there? You can add all those types of things in with like a paint pen. You can, you know, put those dots in there in very specific areas, you know, targeted areas. This is just faster and it's a little bit more varied in terms of the look. Now on this one right here, I could really use some highlights in my trees, you know, like some snow on some of the branches. But I think I'm going to need to spray seal this first before I do that. But let's just get some of this additional texturing in here first. I'm going to put some of this down here too. Sometimes if you make your paint a little bit thinner, I think, you get kind of those larger dots, the more varied dot. I think that's what it is. I don't know, sometimes I've made it thinner or thicker, and it seems like it's like just a super fine mist. I don't know. I don't have this like down to a science, you know, the splatter painting and consistency of the paint. Sometimes I've thought it, you know, I've used my brush when the bristles seem a little bit stiffer too. I don't know. I think maybe it's, you know, spraying it out at a, I don't know, slightly faster rate. I'm not sure. All right, so that right there. and the foil here. Now, if you have something like a word stamp or something like that that you want to stamp somewhere in your scene, do that before you splatter paint, because these little dots, even, you know, no matter how kind of thin they are kind of raised from the surface a bit. So if you're stamping like a word stamp, it can kind of get in the way. All right, I'm not going to do too much on this one because I tend to overspray the my metallics at times. So if I want some more kind of variation in there, I just hand draw it in with the paint pen. Okay, so all right, so recap of what we're doing here. If you're just trying to join in or whatever, this is like an experiment here with these different types of surfaces. Probably, you know, maybe not so conventional of a stamping surface. Yeah, I mean, people stamp on like matte black cardstock at times, you know, in the reverse out impressions. But all of these bases down here were created with the bleed proof white. And I was just wanting to see if I could paint those areas down there below there. Now, I didn't paint it exactly where the imagery went. I just kind of gave a general thing, and I put that snowy bank down there. But I wanted to see if the snowy bank could stamp on top of the Dr. Martens as a base. And then if it could we go in there and add additional colors? So to no surprise, the papers that were a little bit more textured in terms of the matte and the glitter one, I can go in and color those areas in with the colored pencil. On these ones right here that are, you know, real shiny and glossy, where the paint is probably just very much sitting on the surface and not getting absorbed beyond the surface, those areas are kind of prone to being able to be scratched off. So if you wanted to apply like colored pencil on there, that's, you know, you'd have to spray seal these, and I might try that on here still. So, but everything worked a little bit better than I thought it would. I thought that stamping into these very non-porous surfaces like this, I might stamp this image on here, and then when I lifted it off, I thought I might be removing the Dr. Martens as opposed to transferring that ink on there. Now, I did use my Brilliance ink, which is a thicker water-based ink, you know, that would have a better chance probably of transferring on there. Something like a StazOn that's going to dry like instantly upon contact with that Dr. Martens probably would remove some of it. But if it's a darker kind of foundation like that, if you're removing white, you know, maybe it would just read as the image anyway, you know, because you're just revealing that darkness. So whether that ink transferred or it removed the white, maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's the same, you know, it would achieve the same result there. So, you know, you got to think about that too. All right, so these two right here definitely have to be spray sealed. And I think this one right here, this down here, this lower portion though is completely dry and, you know, affixed. I'm just not quite sure about that black directly on top of this foil. If I wiped into it, I don't know if it would smear or not. You know, because it is kind of grooved anyway. All right, so let's go for a little bit of a variation in our textural forms here. Be it snow or stars. I see that right there. So you can just see, you know, some variation up there. The splatter painting, it doesn't give me enough variation. So you can see this right in here. You're looking at it from a little bit of a distance here, but I'll just add in some additional stars. This would be really good with some crystals maybe too. You know, when things are kind of so minimal. Just having a little bit of a different surface on there might be good. And there's the W, like the Cassiopeia. Stamping out actual constellations, if you know one or two up in your sky, is it can make things a little bit more interesting looking, because it, you know, it isn't so kind of, all your stars aren't so equally spaced. It looks more like a kind of a natural sky. And the way for me to do that sometimes is, to go for some kind of, known constellation here. I don't have room for it in here, but I'll go like this. Here's a little bit of Orion. And then I fill in, some additional stars around it like that. There's his Orion's belt and little sword there. That, and let's see if I can bring out some of these trees forms a little bit more. I don't want to spend too much time on this because that's not the point of this video. I just wanted to see if I could stamp on top of that Dr. Martens here. But as this sits, I know I'll get the hankering and I'll, kind of bring out my forms a little bit more. I do enjoy kind of finishing off my pieces as I see fit. If I don't finish it off in the actual video, or if I thought I did, but then I kind of looked at it more and I thought, oh, I can do some additional things on here. See, I need to spray seal because the ink, see that little scribble of that black right there? That's that black Brilliance ink going up into my tip right there. And what that black Brilliance ink, it's a fast drying ink and it's clogging my tip here. So I need to spray seal it just so I'm not digging out or picking up that paint into my extra fine tip right here, which has happened. It kind of makes it clunky. It's not clogged. You just need to get that little bit of media. I think I scooped out a ton of it there. All right, so I'm not going to do that on there. I'll do that later after these have been spray sealed. So anyway, so I don't know. Look for other types of media potentially to incorporate in with your other types of surfaces, your kind of unconventional surfaces. Okay, so for me, there's been a big surprise here with some of it. I was surprised at how non-porous this was when I was putting that slathering of paint down there. It was almost like painting on like a piece of plexiglass or something like that. It was just beating up. But through additional layers, I was able to get some down. The matte, I thought would take it perfectly, because it's absorbent and, it's going to take the paint and water-based media with no problem. But it's a little bit dull, though, But this one right here shocked me because it's the most textured, okay? But I was able to get a really clean impression on top of that. And it's just these types of, glitter paper like this, those multicolored glitter packs like that. Now, the white showed up really well on the, that dark blue, but if I can do that on all these types of things, you can get just some kind of foundation like that, and then you can use colored pencils on there. I thought that worked really good. And then the gold I didn't think would work, too well. I thought it would beat up, and I wouldn't be able to paint that over the top of it, but see, leaving some of that gold where it's not so opaque with the Dr. Martens, and showing through, I thought it gave it some variation in here. So, having that little bit of gold showing through, kind of a thinner application of the Dr. Martens, I thought, this is kind of providing me that color down here in the tone, so you don't really have to go back in there if you don't want to, and you can just do your impressions on here. This would look really great with a word stamp up here in white over the top of it, and, But, these right here, I mean, you can do these types of things. Like I said, knowing that the Dr. Martens worked on there, I'm wondering if things like a primer, even a hardware primer like a Kills or something like that, or just white primer would work on here. And it might, I don't know. and things like a white gesso. Gessos can be a little bit thick. It's almost like acrylic paints, where it might go on too thick, where you can't stamp on top of it. Maybe instead of stamping, the brilliance on top of something like a gesso. For those of you that don't know what gesso is kind of a primer for like canvases. If you're going to paint onto a canvas, usually you don't go on the raw canvas. It's usually primed, and it's usually with gesso. But gesso can be really thick. It can almost be like an acrylic paint on there, giving you this texturing where you might not be able to get a good impression with your stamps if you're going to be using it for that type of thing. So the thin applications of the Dr. Martens being a watercolor paint, I think provided me with a pretty decent flat surface. Again, I'm a little bit shocked at this one right here. The impressions are really clean on this one, as kind of textural as this. Like I said, this one right here, when I was working on this, was it's almost like, it feels like a fine-grained sandpaper texturally. Hello, Connie. Glad you like the vids. You're in Florida. I miss Florida. I've been to Florida a few times teaching and with conventions, but always enjoyed Florida. Florida is so different from each region too, huh? Like Central, Clearwater, and where was that last place? Jacksonville. I never went to Southern, like Miami area. Can you dab on the Dr. Martens like you do the ink? I guess you could, Ginger. You might be able to. You mean with like a cotton ball? The thing about cotton ball and dabbing it on like that, you might get a pretty thick slathering of it, which maybe, if that's the look you're going after, you can, I would guess you can do it. I haven't done that though. The thing about that too is, if you're dabbing like a cotton ball into like, something like this, it's going to really absorb, it's going to really, absorb a lot of that paint into this. So just know that. You can use like a cotton ball as a brush too, I would think. And then maybe when it starts getting a little bit less wet, you can use it as a dabbing mechanism. I don't know how it would work. The Dr. Martens really dries really quickly too. Not like something like a solvent ink or something like that, but I don't know. You'd have to kind of keep that in mind. Thin down for clouds. You might be able to, yeah. Because like on this one right in the background, that Brilliance ink just did not work on that glitter paper. It was just... okay, so I tried to do those clouds in the background here, and it was just picking up too much of that ink, the dye from the glitter paper. So maybe that would be an instance where you spray seal it, before you stamp on the trees. You spray seal it, okay, with like a workable fixative, and then you apply the white on there. So it's not, putting that dye of the blue dye back into solution, okay? And then you make your impressions on top of it. So there might be some just kind of processes like that would work, in terms of your sequencing. A lot of times, when you're working with kind of unconventional stamping surfaces, sometimes it's not so much the media compatibility with it, which it is a lot of the time, okay? But it could be also the sequencing that you do it with. You got to add something in between the layers on there to make it work, or make it work better or more effectively or easier to do too. So there's a lot of, things. And sometimes, it's not some kind of like super hard formula like that. Like I said, sometimes it's not so much a matter of one or the other. It could be both, but just one's just making it faster and easier for you. Like I can do these things like this with the foundation of the Brilliance ink, but it would just take so much longer to do than what we were able to do on these ones right here, just with some bleed proof white and just some quick painting over. I mean, I don't know if any took me longer than a minute as a foundation, to get that on there. I think, like 1 minute probably. This one right here might have taken a little bit longer because I had to go wait for it to dry a little bit, like a few seconds, and then you go over it again to build up some of that white on there. But certainly easier to do. You can do things where you cut out a piece of paper like that, or you stamp your image onto a piece of white paper, and then you adhere it on here, you know, to get different levels, and then you can have those trees stamped, you know, just on the black. But, you know, I don't know, it's a little bit less integrated that way, but sometimes it could be bolder. And then you can do whatever you want on this down here and not worry about it, you know, removing. So that's a benefit of that. But I don't know. I don't know, there's just different looks to it too, you know, with the different sequencing that you do. If this is someone's first video of watching like a Stampscapes video, this is like a, you know, there's other ways you can use stamps and things like that. I'm just trying to figure out different ways to use some other types of, you know, surfaces with the stamps just for some different looks. And, you know, and a lot of us have a lot of different types of papers and things like that in our, you know, whatever our, you know, our supplies. So it's just kind of fun to dip into there and see how we can use some of these in different ways, or to be just able to utilize them, you know, to stamp on them, and not just as, you know, whatever paper that we can mount other cards to, you know. It's, I don't know, like this one right here, you know, I'm not going to get this look, you know, this glittery look on here. I don't know if you can see it here, but see, even see down here where I can see through some of this white paint, it still has this glittery sheen. It's hard to show. I don't think you can tell at all, but you know, that kind of iridescent paper like that, this area down here is a little bit extra glittery, from having that reflective type of thing showing through some of this white paint on there. Yeah, I can really tell close up like this, that little bit of a sheen to it. So I don't know, just some things look a little bit different. Like this down here with that gold showing through that white paint. I'm not going to be able to get that look right here in this area just by doing, you know, a white impression or black impression on top of a white piece of paper and then trying to get that gold kind of reflective look like that underneath there showing through. Like you can see that in there like that. It's not so extreme like that, but you can see what I'm talking about, you know, when I hold this up, you know, some of that reflective light shows through that snow. And, you know, snow, you know, is very reflective and transparent, you know, and when you have light kind of bouncing off of it, it shimmers. So you can get those types of things potentially, you know, by tweaking your media around a little bit. At least that's what we're going for. So, okay, so I have a few more things to do on these pieces, but that's, I don't know. I think it was pretty fun. I don't know. I'm always surprised, but I'm trying not to be too surprised anymore these days because I'm always kind of, I don't know, when I've had kind of these preconceived notions of, especially what probably wouldn't work, when I've been trying it lately, it's worked to some degree and a lot of times better than I thought it would. So like on this one right here, I thought those white trees would show up on there. They didn't, you know, but on, you know, some of these other ones, it showed up much better, you know, so go figure. So I don't know. I know nothing. I've come to realize. Okay, let's see. Yeah, the Dr. Martens, you can't really stamp with the Dr. Martens. It's a watercolor paint, you know, unless you can, you know, maybe if you did one of those things where you took a brayer and then there's a slathering of Dr. Martens or something like that, and you brayer it onto a piece of glass, and then while it's still wet, you put your stamp into it and then go, but the time you go, you know, you go into it and transfer it, I don't know if it would still be wet enough to transfer over. It might just dry instantly. It's worth a try, though. Maybe you can try it with different things. I don't know. Or you might be able to take, you know, some of the Dr. Martens and, you know, cotton ball, and then maybe you dab it on lightly like this. It dries so fast, though. And then you really fast and you stamp it out like that. Maybe it would work. Maybe it would work with a more solid imagery, though, where this one's more spindly and it might be drying fast, but like a big solid like pine tree. I don't know, it might work. But if I was doing something like that for that purpose, I would just get, my Stays On white pigment ink, and I would think that would be better. Oh, so maybe the Stays On would work better for white impressions on this. I need to get a re-inker for this one, though. I keep saying that, but I just haven't gotten around to it. So maybe that would work on there where the Brilliance ink didn't. The Brilliance ink's more translucent and, slower drying, I think. Oh, and the Brilliance ink up top here, what happened was it was like those clouds. It just kept absorbing some of that dye in the background, so it just got darker and darker and darker. Spray metallic glossy. What is that? I use it in the sky with different brushes. Oh, It's cloudy, rainy, muggy, and sunny out in Maine. That's out in Maine. I asked Harold or Linda, whoever's on. Dr. Martin's clean off stamps super easy. Dr. Martin's cleans off like instantly. It's see this right here. It's on my plastic right here. Now, I mean, if it's on rubber too, it's going to clean off just no problem. But it's one of the easiest things. It's not like, don't think of it as acrylic paints, which don't clean off. But see that right there? It just comes off like instantly, like that. Okay, and it comes off this too. You don't even, this could be sitting around for 2 weeks and I don't get around to cleaning it off. Run it under the water a couple seconds, just do it like that, and it just comes right out. It's the most, I don't know, whatever, user-friendly medium. It'll clean out of your brushes, no problem. Like I said, any of these ones right around here, this is the first time I've used this one, but this one I use all the time. And, the paintbrush here, zero issues with it. It goes back into solution really easily. So yeah, Dr. Martin's, yeah. It's not, like I said, it'll clean off like super, super easy. And like I said, it's mostly a calligrapher's type of medium. Remember, the calligraphers are using it with dip pens, so it has that tiny little, dip pens might have that tiny little line down the middle of their metallic nibs. And that pen, it has to feed down that thing as they're working it, and they do brush work with it too, but I know calligraphers use their dip pens with it as well. And that's a fine, tiny, tiny little, whatever feeder, I don't know what they call it, gutter, I don't know, whatever you call it down there, that has to feed through that tip of that nib, to get variations in thick and thick and, thin and thick. And so, it cleans out of the center of that little nib with zero issues. So it's a really fine type of medium, and I think that's what makes it bleed proof and easily goes into solution. All right, so anyways, thanks for joining in on the Stampscapes lab. More kind of experiments to come. This one is kind of an extreme one, but I think I don't know, I think there's some potential for it, with some different media. I really love the gold one, and I like the glitter paper. This one right here, we'll see how it goes after I spray seal this. And especially if I can apply my colored pencils to it to model the forms a little bit more. And see, I'd like to add in like some little mist in here too, just to add in some additional textures. It really into almost all these. So I'll try spray sealing it, and maybe I'll finish off one of these other pieces here with some of those additional kind of finishing touches, and we'll see if we can refine it. And we'll format them into cards and see what they look like. Hello, Crystal, how are you? Now that you're here, Crystal, we were just waiting for you to join in, to conclude this this live stream. No, I'm just kidding. So Crystal, these were all, this is a blue glitter paper, glossy dark cardstock, matte black cardstock, and silver foil, okay? The experiment was to try some of the Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White in this area down here. And then what I did was I stamped over it with the Snowy Bank just to see if these, if the Dr. Martin's white paint would accept those ink impressions, and if it did, how well, or if I tried stamping into it, would that Dr. Martin's just come right off of the, you know, paper where it didn't adhere to it. So this one right here, these two right here, the white paint is not, probably not adhered to it, and I have to spray seal them, but it was affixed enough to where I could put my impressions right into that white paint and, you know, get my impressions on there. So it makes it kind of usable for that type of application, which is fun. And then on a couple of these ones where it's a little bit more porous and textured, we added in some colored pencil back into our impressions. Okay, but some of it, as I was trying my colored pencil in there, it was just scratching off the white Dr. Martin's ink. So spray sealing needed in order to do that. And then we'll see if you can accept other media over the top of it. Yeah. All right. So anyways, thanks again, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of evening. And thanks as always for tuning into the channel. We'll see you on the next, hope to see you on the next live.